Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining our podcast, Moms on the Move. I'm Jen Wills.
And I'm Ashley Steigerwald.
We have Lindsey DeLoach Jones with us today.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
She didn't know it was a video podcast.
Oh, but you look
I did. You caught me on a good day. You caught me on a good
amazing.
day.
I was actually, as we were sitting here thinking, I was like, I really enjoy your hair.
Oh, thank you. It's
I was like,
once every week when I wash it.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. You get out of the shower and you're like, oh my God.
Right?
I need photos of this.
Right?
I need evidence.
Exactly.
So Lindsey is a writer, editor. You co-founded, what is it,
Rightshare, yeah.
downtown.
Uh-huh.
And you also are teaching.
Correct.
So you're about to teach at the governor's?
Yeah, so starting next week, I'll be teaching juniors and seniors in the creative writing department at the governor's school, which is great. And then Rightshare is like an upstate writers network for people who, we kind of run the gamut, people who want to learn how to write, they have interest in writing, or people who are already established writers. We put together a group of consultants who we find jobs for and connect them to the right people who need writers. So
Okay.
Every writer I know has their toe in a lot of different things. You know, you just kind of piece it together. So
Right. And you taught at Clemson too?
I did. When I first got out of grad school, I taught English literature and then later creative writing at Clemson for 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have 4 kids.
And I have 4 kids.
I feel like I'm very impressed right now.
I do.
How old are your kids?
Okay, so they are, I got to think about this. They all bump up in age at the same over the summer. So they're 9 and 7, and then I have 5-year-old twins.
Okay.
Who are really in a stage right now. So
The 5-year-olds.
the 5-year-olds are
See, I
killing
feel like
me.
once they hit 5, they had like the little, well, what is it called? Like the circle of empathy. It finally happens.
That was my experience with my
the other
older
two.
girls, and these two are like devolving or something. I don't know what's happening, but
So your 2 oldest are girls, and then the twins are...
a boy and a girl.
Okay.
So 3 girls and a boy total.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's a twin thing or what, but they're really mean to each other and they fight all day. So that's a new phase. We'll get out. You know, that's one of those things about motherhood. You just begin to realize everything's a phase. You'll come out of it.
Just when you get comfortable.
Exactly.
It's going to swap on you.
Or if you tell yourself, like you said, when they turn 5, it'll calm down, and then it's like, no, it's not going to.
Yeah.
It's going to be crazy.
Yeah,
But yeah, they're all very sweet. It might be the end of the summer too.
Oh gosh.
Very much.
Lots of together time.
Very much.
Too much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm
They
writing
need their independent, they need their
Right.
independent activities, their
Right.
teachers that outside, you know,
Exactly.
Positive reinforcement. They're over all of us.
Exactly.
They're over each other
Oh,
right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to
I get
start
it.
planting crops and putting them to work and actually utilizing summer break for what it is meant
Seriously.
for, which is manual
Yeah.
outdoor labor. Let's all do it.
Let's start a petition.
I was about to say
I love it.
community child labor gardens next summer.
I will say we've been on, a couple vacations, and we just got back last week from the lake. And, after you get back, you have that detox period of like, we were with our cousins and we were doing something all day, every day. And I've been telling my kids all week, it's time for you to get bored.
Yep.
That's what summer's for. Get really bored.
Yep.
My dad used to say, if you told me you were bored, he'd say, go pour sand in your head and pick it out.
That's funny.
And so that's what I'm telling my kids. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's okay. I'm okay with you being bored.
Yep.
That's part of it. So,
I feel like going into the writing section, creativity spawns from boredom. Like
100%.
you've got to let your
Yes.
brain just go to those places.
absolutely. You got to have some downtime and we take walks and do stuff like that. And that's where I think you get ideas and you, have all your materials available. And I say, go figure out what you can do. And the problem is that usually makes a mess. When you let them get creative
Right.
and you let them get bored, they usually like turn the whole living room into a fort or cut up a million pieces of paper.
Drawing your furniture.
Drawing your furniture.
Yeah.
That happened this week. Yeah.
Same.
And the wallpaper, drew on the furniture and the wallpaper. But, ultimately it feels worth it to say you're figuring out how to entertain yourself, you're pushing boundaries, and we're talking about it and all that. So.
And now you're going to go wash the walls.
And now, scrub the chair that you, right.
So I read, you had these 2 articles in Town
Uh-huh.
that I read.
Oh, yeah.
And the one, it was called Social Fatigue.
Uh-huh.
So I loved it. It very much
thanks.
spoke to
Yeah.
me. So she was writing about how you felt just like really overwhelmed and like couldn't get it together, and you tried to like cut out different various things, and then you realized it was ultimately social media that was stressing you.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been in really different places with social media, and for about a year, well, for many years, I didn't do social media. And then I cut it all, and I cut television also, because I'm sure y'all identify with this. It was one of those things where you think it's relaxing you and it's not. Like even television, you get home, you feel like you can't move at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, and you just turn the TV on. But I was finding at the end of that, I wasn't actually rested. Like I thought I was going to feel more rested, but I didn't. And so I actually read this Stephen King writing book, and he said, writers have no business watching television. You don't have enough time, turn the television off. And I thought, well, I'm just going to try it. I did that for about a year, and it was great. I read so much. I learned so much. But then, quarantine and COVID and the world, I think, felt really heavy and stressful. And so TV did end up becoming a lighter. I will say I don't watch any heavy television.
Yeah.
I can't do it. Just because the world feels kind of heavy right now. But, some good my husband knows, we sit down on the sofa and I say, it's got to be funny or it's got to be light. But all that to say, seasonally, I think you really have to be in tune with what you need at that time. And there are times where I knew social media had to go. And then I'm at a point in my career now where social media is kind of a big part of what I'm trying to do. And so it's back, and it has boundaries, and TV's back. But I think there will be another time when I'm away from it again.
Yeah.
And I think just knowing that you have those options and not feeling like you're stuck forever in what you're doing right now is helpful,
Well, you said two things. I think the first one was that it's always there but never gratifying.
Right.
I was like, oh, wow. And the next was how great you feel when you finish a book. But social media is like a book that never finishes.
A book that never finishes.
So true.
Isn't that great? I was
just
like,
refreshes
oh my
and refreshes
gosh.
and refreshes.
And it with both of those together, like last night, I just kept thinking about that. And anyway, so that kind of goes a little bit though into what we're going to talk about, which is you are going to be writing a book. You wrote a book.
I wrote a book.
You wrote a book.
I did.
And you're getting published, but your publisher was like, we need you to grow your...
Right. Well, so the first step now in the way the publishing industry is set up is that you have to get an agent. And so you basically send a couple chapters of your book and a query letter to a bunch of agents, most of them in New York, at least pre-COVID. Now they're kind of spread out. And you say, do you want to represent this book? And take it to a publisher and try to get it published. And the big thing right now is no, you have to have a platform first. Which is discouraging because it used to be that you wrote a book and they helped you build your platform. They helped it find its readers. And so, like I said, I'm back on social media because part of it is, okay, if this is, social media is not the end game for me, but it is a stepping stone to another place, which is talking about and having conversations about what is meaningful to me in the public sphere, So I'm doing more of that to try to sort of grow like a built-in readership before the book finds a publisher. And it's hard because most people who write books are not also people who would be good at marketing themselves or even doing the business side of that. It all feels really foreign to me. I think most writers would love to just lock the door in a closet and just write all day. But that's just the reality of the publishing industry these days. So it's been a wake-up call to kind of learn that side of it. But I'm trying to lean into it and use it in a way that feels authentic.
What's the abstract of the book?
So the book starts when I was about 25 and I was I knew everything.
Obviously.
Everything. I was raised in a really, really conservative faith background and just knew all the answers to all the questions. And then from about 25 to 35, everything just started to slowly sort of crumble. It started with deciding we were going to get pregnant and we weren't able to get pregnant. We ended up fostering a little girl, and that exposed me to a lot of she was from Haiti, and we went to Haiti. And then going through infertility treatments and just being exposed to one difficult problem after another, I started to realize that the framework through which I was understanding the world was insufficient. And so it's really a book about what do you do when, you wake up one day and everything you thought you knew doesn't provide a good answer anymore. And for me, that was basically this process of infertility and IVF and trying to get pregnant, and then that not going the way I expected. And but I think most women understand that problem. A lot of women get there in a different way, maybe marriage or something with their parents or whatever, but a lot of different women show up that way. And so I think it's a universal story just about what do you do when you have to reconsider everything,
So
and
it's
how do
kind
you
of like
rebuild
a phase
that?
of deconstruction, reconstruction.
That's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
One thing that's really weird about the book is that it talks about faith, and there's not a great sector in publishing to talk about faith that isn't explicitly like, I'm going to sell this in a Christian
Faith-based.
bookstore.
Yeah.
And it doesn't belong in a Christian bookstore. That's not the kind of story it is. But it does talk about faith. And so I'm hoping, one thing that I'm passionate about is like getting that conversation back into just civic conversation. It's like, it's okay to have a faith, but not get totally pigeonholed into this, one little sector of people who believe exactly the same thing. So it's expansive, I think, in that way. And and that's the whole point, is that the story, I started out with maybe what I would consider sort of smaller understanding, and then I ended up with a larger understanding and a lot more empathy for people coming from different places.
Because that can be very unmooring when you're 25 and your faith creates this wonderful little box, and all of a sudden when one aspect of your belief or value system doesn't fit directly in that box anymore, I've been experiencing that is where are the edges of the box anymore?
Right.
And it can be a very unmooring, meandering experience of because there are so many, and saying the original church that I was brought up in was here are the boxes. Here's good.
Right.
Here's the nice good girl, and here's the not nice not good girl. And there's a lot more gray.
Right.
And it's a journey. Yeah.
It is, and it takes a long time, and I don't think you can speed it up.
Yeah.
But I think my passion, like the thing that keeps me up at night, is that this is sort of the problem that's underlying all the other problems that we're having in America. I think this idea that, we're putting our belief systems and our ideas, our politics, everything in these little boxes, and if somebody else doesn't line up perfectly, we vilify them. Yeah. And I think Arlie Hochschild talks about, she wrote a book called Strangers in Their Own Land, and she's a Berkeley sociologist who goes to basically the Deep South and tries to figure out, like, why are these people voting the way they're voting, thinking the way they're thinking? And her conclusion is that human beings really owe each other listening to one another's deep story. So not just what are you do, how are you voting, or where do you live or whatever, but what's going on underneath that? How'd you get there? And that's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about telling stories, listening to other people's stories, and figuring out, is there something in your deep story that I can connect with, even if I don't connect with how that plays out in the world. And I think if we all did that a little bit more, I mean, call me an idealist, I don't know, but I think conversation would be a lot more civil. And I do think that we would understand and recognize each other's humanity more.
I think that's it. And we've talked about this before. It's the dehumanization,
right?
The adding a label,
right?
And you are this label, and I don't have to look at you as a whole holistic human being with a backstory,
right?
With trauma, with troubles, with joys, and it's I forgot, there's this book, and this guy makes up words for human experiences, and I need to remember it, I need to write it down, but it's one of them. It's this experience of looking across the room, driving and seeing somebody else in the other car and wondering, I wonder, what is your life? What have you experienced? And it's so easy in our fast-paced world, and the flicking through the never-ending, refreshing social media with no end. Right. That's a very relatable concept.
Right. Yep.
To forget that we're holistic human beings with multitudes of feelings and experiences. Right. That you're exactly right. Even if it's somebody who's totally polar opposite of everything you believe in, I bet if you sat down and had a below-surface conversation with other people, there's something that you have in common that you can relate to.
Right. Yeah.
And it might not, it's like even just like feelings, feelings of, I always say, like, especially with moms, like we're so much more alike than different.
Mhm.
Just with, it might not be on the surface again. We might live different places or, whatever, but the feelings are there.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
that's a big part of who we are.
It is. And I think, like you said, if you label somebody, it just makes it easier to dismiss them. And it's hard work to really get to know people. It's hard and it's exhausting.
And being vulnerable.
Being vulnerable, like my family does not love some of my vulnerability sometimes. But I think, when I wake up in the morning, I ask myself what I think one important thing for women is identifying what you're good at and then sort of staying in that lane. Because if I try to do all the things, I end up not being effective at anything. And I think saying, I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. So how can stories make the world a better place? And I think that's part of it. When we really tell the truth about who we are and where we've been, it's hard to argue with somebody's story. It's hard to say, well, that doesn't make any sense, that, you don't deserve to think that way. Because when you hear it, it usually does make sense. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I think I actually really believe it does good in the world to tell stories. And I think that actually all these other policies and all these other things all come out. They are all the eventualities of these stories that we're telling ourselves, these national stories that we're telling ourselves. So,
but I think we've, in a certain sense, lost a lot of the storytelling in social media. Where
now it's just like arguing.
It's 144 characters. It's quick snippets based on unidentifiable tone or assumptions. But I think that's absolutely beautiful, this whole aspect of storytelling and the lost art of storytelling. Because, if you look at a lot of religious manuscripts, it's the parables, it's the stories, and that's why has that survived the generation? Because it works. Storytelling works.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it slows you down and it helps you think about things. But I think you have to be intentional about how you're using social media. And like you said, if you're flipping through, and it's one TikTok, another TikTok, another TikTok, which it's fun. We all, like I said, we're in a pandemic. We all need some stress relief. But I do think, like on my social media, I'm trying really hard to slow it down, and I'll write all this text, in an Instagram story, for example. And it's not for everybody, for sure, but the response has been overwhelming. People really wanting to stay and engage and have conversations in a way that surprised me.
Yeah.
Your one post was about IVF and your remaining eggs.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so interesting because I have so many friends. Do you have so many friends who do IVF?
No.
No? I have one. She's about to have her baby, but same thing. She has several remaining.
Yep.
And it's that, what do you do? Like that moral dilemma of what's the right thing to do.
And nobody talks about it.
Nobody talks about it.
And I've actually talked to multiple women who have said, can we go to lunch? And we go to lunch and they say, I did IVF. And then they say, never tell a soul. It's like this almost shameful thing. And I knew going into it, if this is a thing I do, it's also going to be a thing I'm open about, because that's just, the way I operate. And I don't begrudge anybody at all for saying I'm going to keep this a secret for whatever reason. But I think there are so many women who've done it that you don't even know have done it, because maybe some of them are trying to preserve this idea of like, this happened easily. And, but I think the more it's kind of like everything else we're trying to normalize right now.
Yeah.
Conversations about mental health and race and socioeconomic status, all these things. Like, let's normalize the fact that not all of us got pregnant in a romantic setting, right? Like, with the candles lit and,
Right. Like, look at all these needles. And then now I have this dilemma of what am I going to do? And I think the more women that actually had this conversation, it'd be like a comfort and there might be some clarity.
Right. And I don't want my kids either. I think kids pick up on shame so easily if there's even like a hint of it. And I don't want my kids to internalize that shame. That like the way you got here is somehow It wasn't ideal. It was hard. It was really hard. But at the same time, we did it because we really wanted you.
Yeah.
And we're so happy that you're here.
This is how much mommy wanted you.
This is how much mommy wanted you.
When I was at the women's college up in Boston, one of the girls I rode with, she was like, guess what? The first time I meet her, she's like, guess what? And I was like, what? She's like, I was the first to test tube baby. And I'm like, good for you, girl. High five.
Wow.
But she was just like, that was her, it was like the first thing that came out when you met him.
Yeah.
And I was like, good, like your parent, good on them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They made this like a celebration for you.
Sure, yeah.
But you're exactly right that the children just they're everybody talks about them being knowledge sponges. Like, they just take in everything. Your emotions, your shame, your internalized fears, like the whole bit. They take it all
we've been
up.
talking a lot at home about. I have one kid who's really anxious, and I say, "How about this? If mom's not anxious, don't be anxious. If we're doing something and you look at me and you can tell that I have no anxiety, you can have no anxiety. Now, if something's happening and mom gets really nervous, it's okay for you to get nervous. Like, try to take cues from me." And it's been so funny because we were packing for a vacation last week, and my 7-year-old said to the 9-year-old, "Hey, you know how mom said not to get anxious unless she's anxious? This trip must be really nerve-wracking because mom is losing her mind." And I was like, well, that's not exactly what I meant. But, things like masks to school and am I going to get COVID and all this. And I said, if you see that I'm calm, I want you to follow my lead on that, because if something's really, really threatening for you, you'll know. Yeah. And I think that's been obviously a theme of the last year is like, these kids are soaking up their parents' anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I think politics aside, or opinions on all that aside, which I respect all of them, I think trying not to take that home with me and letting my kids pick up on it, 90% of the reason my kids are going to be anxious about COVID is because they see me being anxious about COVID. And I feel like that's a gift I can give them to sort of process that on my own and try to leave it out of their little hearts and minds, because they already have enough to try to figure out,
I know.
So I want to backtrack to something you said in the beginning, talking about the difference between rest, relaxation, and I'm going to throw dissociation in there, because I think as women, and I think a lot of people feel this, but specifically as women, that is something that I've been battling with recently, maybe in the past month or so, is really reevaluating what I consider rest, relaxation, and what is just me disassociating at the end of the day. So I'll throw that to you, because I think that played into what you were talking about earlier.
I think so often rest is counterintuitive. Like, the thing that's actually restful is not the thing that you feel like you think what's going to be restful. Like I said, turn on the TV or scroll through Instagram. But sometimes rest actually requires energy. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a walk, or like I'll get out, sounds kind of cheesy, but I'll get out all my painting stuff and I'll do watercolor at the table or something like that. And my husband will walk in and be like, "It's 9:00 at night. What are you doing?" And I don't know how to explain it, but that for me, when I get done with that, it's like my whole soul has just been reset. Whereas when I get done with Instagram, I'm jacked up, I'm antsy. And I read recently about something called pathological empathy, which I think people are struggling with right now, which is that, say you're on Instagram or Facebook and you're taking in all these traumas, and you really are internalizing them, but because the quantity of the trauma and the bad things happening in the world is so huge, you're paralyzed. You can't do anything about any of it. And I think one thing that has been helpful for me has been to say, I'm going to try to keep my circle to what I can actually do something about. And that means I cannot let all of the world's trauma into my heart. I just can't do it, because what will happen is, and it has happened before, I will just be lying prostrate on the floor, like, what is happening to the world? And that doesn't actually do anybody any good. It's totally overwhelming. So how can I say, where's the trauma happening, or where are the needs, first in my family, and then in maybe my kids' classes, and then in my neighborhood, and then, whatever else, in these sort of concentric circles. And if I have to zoom back in to my smaller circle sometimes and say it's just the 6 of us, that's what we're focusing on this week, I think that's okay. Because I think we feel like we get something out of hearing all these things, and we so badly want to know and be involved Again, it's very counterintuitive to say, I need to know less so that I can do more. That's really hard for me. But it's something I'm trying to do. So I think dissociation is part of that too. It's like, if we just hear so much, good or bad, what's happening in other people's lives that is so great, or what's happening in other people's lives that's so hard, our brains just kind of have to go offline. And I want to stay present, and I want to stay active in life. And so I try to limit what I take in,
It's a little bit what we've talked about with that freeze mode.
Yeah.
You talk about a lot,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I talk about freeze mode all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because that is what I realized that I was doing it pre-COVID, and then especially during COVID, being at home, homeschooling, trying to also maintain my job, plus other volunteer responsibilities I had. It just became so overwhelming that I got caught in freeze mode for a significant period of time. And I've always struggled with depression and anxiety. And so it's that combination of depression, anxiety, freeze mode, poor coping mechanisms, including, drinking wine at the end of the night. And in that freeze mode, it's how do you break out of that freeze mode? And that's something that I'm continually working on is trying to identify when I'm starting to get into freeze mode, and then trying to move myself. And to break out of that freeze mode, whether it's realizing I'm about to go freeze, I need to these priorities here. And somebody, I don't remember if it was on this podcast or somebody else was talking about, the balls, the bouncing balls, which ones are glass, which ones are ping pong balls, and realizing occasionally I can drop a ping pong ball, I can throw one to my husband, I can throw a few at my kids and say, I need you to take care of this because I'm about to go into freeze mode, and I need to get out of this. And it could be something as simple as going for a walk. But I've realized for me, getting out of the freeze involves movement. Immediate movement.
Absolutely. I identify with that a lot. And I think I have a big sign on my office wall, which my office is a closet inside my husband's actual office. So lest that sound glamorous. But there's a big sign on the wall, and I heard it on Suzanne Stabile does these podcasts about like Enneagram and stuff like that. And she says that every morning when you wake up, ask yourself, what is mine to do today? And the two parts of that I think are important are, what is mine? I cannot do all the things. And what is mine to do today? So not tomorrow, not next year, but if I can, again, it's all about making things manageable so that I actually can get done the things I need to do today. But she talked on that podcast about how, if you may not be the personality to be the room mom of your kids' class, and if you say yes to being room mom, what you're actually doing, especially if you're somebody who's like real a go-getter and ambitious and all these things, you might be taking it from somebody else who might have done it if nobody else had stepped up. And I love the way she put it. She's like, don't take that from somebody else. Don't do that. Sit back, let somebody else take it, give yourself permission to not do it. And that's been good for me because at the end of the day, I could do it. I could plan a cupcake party or whatever, but that's not the thing that I feel like I'm most called to be doing right now. And so I'm going to let somebody else have that one. And I think for women, that's really hard for lots of reasons. We have this obligation that we think we need to be omnipresent.
It's hard to say no. You have that guilt.
Right.
It's like
But I would rather live with a little bit of guilt than be resentful every time I have to show up for that party and plan. And I realized that when my boys were younger in elementary school, I felt that need that as a stay-at-home mom, because at the time I was doing title abstracting, other stuff, which was not all the time. It was not full-time. It was touch and go. That as a stay-at-home mom, I should do A, B, C, D, and E. And I realized really quick, I don't like doing A, B, C, D, and E. And for me, it was that push-pull of you should be doing this because you're a stay-at-home. And how do you not get joy from bringing cupcakes to class? I don't. It's just not yours. For me.
Yeah.
But
that's what we have in common.
Yeah. It's just not for me. And like you said, that's taking away from somebody else who would probably absolutely love to do it. And there's nothing wrong with them getting joy from doing that. It just didn't fill me with joy. But I fight sometimes with this battle. Like, for example, there was an older gentleman who mentioned to me at one point, he's like, the always, really treasure this moment. You're never going to get it back. Live in that moment.
Yes.
And then he looked at me and said, don't chase other shiny things. And I was like, you're making me mad. You're making me mad because it was the implication that you should be home with your kids.
That's right. Yeah.
And if you're doing anything outside of that, you're chasing shiny distractions.
Right.
And I'm like, I also need to do what's going to make me feel fulfilled.
Right.
Because if I'm home resentful with my kids all day, that isn't good for them either. So there's some kind of balance in between there that I think a lot of moms struggle with. And I think the moms who are stay-at-home moms who love doing that too feel that push also. I don't think it's exclusive to moms that work or do things outside. I think that absolutely applies to stay-at-home moms too. And what you said about the being human and just like remove the judgment. Just step back for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, and just what I want to raise, I want to raise really passionate, weird kids.
Yes.
And I tell them all the time, why be normal when you can be weird? That's like a little sign in our house. But the idea is that, I grew up just really fitting right in all the way through. And then I realized I actually was passionate about things. And the more passionate I got about things, the weirder I felt. Like, it's weird that all I want to do is read, or it's weird that I write this stuff or tell people these things or whatever. That's the place where your weirdness comes out is also the place where you're probably going to make the most difference. And I think I would rather raise kids who are like just total either nerds or, weirdos, they don't fit in, whatever. Go after something, care about something. And I would prefer that all day to, them just trying to fit into what the world expects of them. We've got enough of those women. We've all tried to be those women. It doesn't work. It doesn't feel good. And so I don't care what it is. Like, if you want to be, a hairstylist or a painter or a whatever, do the very best you can. Love it. Be weird about it. Be passionate about it. And that's all I want from my kids. But I really think that's when women are effective, is when they say, I'm going to really go after something. And
find that thing where you lose track of time, where all of a sudden you look at the clock and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been working on this for 5 hours.
Right. And sometimes that is, for moms, sometimes that is sitting on the floor doing a puzzle with your kid. Like, I've had those moments too, but sometimes it's something outside of the house. And I think just leaning in that direction of, what do I really feel like I'm doing? Where do I really feel like I'm doing the most good? And when my kids were little, I felt like that was at home a lot. And now they're getting older, I feel like they need other women to follow. They need other adults in their lives. They need, peers. And it doesn't need to just be me. So I'm not doing anybody any good, by just beating myself up for not being the cupcake lady every time, Although, again, thank you to the cupcake ladies.
Yes.
And sometimes the cupcake lady is me, but yes.
When they asked me if I want to do, I was like, you don't want me to be reminded. You don't want that. But anyway, so what's your book? Tell us about the book. When's it coming?
I don't know. Right now, what I'm trying to do is secure an agent.
Okay.
In order to secure an agent, again, I've got to work on this platform thing. Basically, what I've gotten is 2 agents who've said, I really, really love this book. 2 agents who I really admire who've said, I love this book. I want you to go build a platform and come back.
So we need people to follow.
That's where I'm at.
I need to read this book. I need to read the book.
So I hope it's really like 15 years in the making, but it's 5 years of total writing of my life that I felt like this was the thing I had to do. I kept trying to put it away. I couldn't. It just, it's one of those things. It was like, I say to my husband, I'm like, I've been pregnant, many times. But I have been pregnant with this book the longest, and I need to give birth to this book. It's killing me. So so we're getting close.
So where can everyone find you then?
So Instagram, at Lindsey DJ, and Facebook, Lindsey DeLoach Jones, Instagram, Twitter, Lindsey D Jones. Come follow me, and not just because I'm trying to build a platform and use your followingness, but I really am trying to facilitate interesting conversations about all these things.
You're an interesting girl. I feel like you just have so much that you can give.
Right back at you.
It's going to happen for you. It really is.
Thanks.
You need to come back on.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk for hours.
I know.
Yeah. Well,
You'll
thank
do
you.
Great. And actually, you have to read her other pieces in town. The one with the fish.
Yes.
We'll end on that note. But she said she was looking at the beta fish. I related
Who
to
has
this
since
too.
died. Rest in peace, beta fish. Yes. Yeah, and Write Share too. So it's one word, WRITESHARE, and we do writing classes and offer writing consultants out of M. Judson Books, which is the bookstore on Main Street downtown. So that's also a cool organization with Ashley Warlick, who's a novelist in town, that we co-founded together, if you want to get involved with that as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I
Wait,
appreciate
what
it.
happened when you were
Oh,
looking at
the
the
fish,
beta
the
fish?
fish.
The
I need
beta
to know what
fish. I
happened
look at
with
the beta
fish.
fish and
...
I know.
Right.
No,
I was
so
like,
she said she was like looking at the fish one night and everyone was in bed and she wrote something like, I realized the fish's eyes were always open. I was always the last one in bed at night, the first one up. I looked in the mirror, my eyes were always like bulging.
right.
I was like, I get that so much too.
The fish who just flaps his little fins all night long, stays awake. Again, that's a season for moms, and you'll come out of it, but it's a tough one when you're in it, for
You're
sure.
a beta fish right now.
And you're in it.
I'm a beta fish.
And you're a beta fish. That's right. We all are.
It spoke to me.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, we really thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
This
Yeah.
was
So
good.
best of luck with everything. We'll have to keep up with, follow
I
what's
hope you
going
will.
on.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to thank our sponsors real quick. Amanda McCall, Prime Lending, Wilson Associates Real Estate, Parham Smith Archenhold Attorneys, and Blackacre Law. Thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to seeing you next time.